Hello and welcome to Today on Endures, where I am here with Jodi Holz Quintal, who is the host of Strata Stories. Strata Stories is an education platform for people trying to navigate the Strata experience. Now, Jodi also has a strong background in corporate, in customer experience and strategy. But today I've invited her on the show to talk about how you actually lead a team to perform when you're given one that's rife with burnout already. So, Jodi, thanks for coming on.
Problems. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
Yeah, me too. So, you have a broad range of knowledge, and today we're going to narrow in on the strata industry, which
Yes.
is an industry a lot of people don't know a lot about, even I think if they're in a strata scheme.
Yes.
Yeah, so talk to me about your why, like why you got into strata stories and what you see around teams and burnout in the
Yeah.
strata industry.
So I had a very unique entry into Strata because I actually started working in the marketing and communications section of a marketing company. And even then, I didn't actually understand what marketing was. Um, sorry, marketing. I didn't understand what Strata was. So what I kind of established as I went along is that most people don't know what strata is, even as you said, even if they live in a strata building. And I started to reflect back and realize I'd been renting in strata properties for a long time at that point, and I'd never realized there was any such thing as strata. And then along my career in the strata industry, I became an owner myself and I started to experience the other side. And I realized that there was such an experience gap in the industry where the owner's experience on one side, the service model that was being given on the industry side just didn't match. And obviously that causes a large amount of problems for the owner experience in Australia. But something I also saw that I think would be really great for us to talk about today is what was happening on the other side of that. So yes, owners weren't getting the service they needed, but the strata industry itself, has a bit of a burnout epidemic happening. So what we were seeing in the strata companies is people being put in leadership positions and being asked to create a high performance team with a team that was ripe with burnout, and it's one of those things I feel really passionately about supporting and solving because as an owner, I can't get the service I need if the burnout issue isn't addressed in the strata industry.
And if people are changing all the time,
That's
the
it.
management you're dealing with is changing all the time, and it's frustrating
Yes.
all round.
Yeah.
So, what do you think are some of the factors that are leading burnout to be so rife in that industry?
I think there's a large emotional load. So what a lot of owners don't realize is what's happening on the other side of that experience for them. So when they're having a emotional reaction to something, and we all do, we're human. And I say this all the time on our episodes, like as an owner, I have human emotional reactions to things. But I'm one person having one emotional reaction to a strata manager, but that strata manager might have hundreds of owners having emotional reactions towards them. That's a lot to carry as a person, as an employee, to be shouldering that emotional load and to be anticipating having to shoulder that emotional load. And I say this to owners sometimes, can you imagine what it's like for a strata manager to for the phone to ring and then to have that split second thought of, oh my God, I hope I don't get yelled at. I just don't have it in me to get yelled at down the phone one more time today.
Yeah.
That's a lot for a person to carry, and they're just an employee. That's just their job. And I think in the industry, that's not being addressed. The emotional load that the strata managers are carrying just isn't being addressed. It's being seen as a systems problem or a resilience problem. And you have it's growing. Like the problem is growing and growing, and you have strata managers who are continuously swapping jobs because they're looking for an environment where they won't have that. But there's not many of those environments available to
It's
them.
going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
What has changed over the last few years in the strata environment? I mean, is it a case of people having to adapt to rapid change or being forced to do more with less? Or what are maybe some other factors that are leading to that emotional load?
So I think, I mean, I guess this is my opinion. Um, my opinion is that as more and more people live in strata, there's more and more new people coming into the service with very little understanding. So the strata managers are not just managing a building; they're having to introduce and educate new owners into the way it works. They're having to deal with a larger and larger amount of people who don't know,
Mm,
and that obviously that automatically leads to emotional reactions because when you think you can do something in your own unit and then the strata manager is the one that has to tell you, oh, you actually legally can't do that. It has to go to a vote or you have to put an application in or, you know, there's more and more frequency and volume of those conversations happening towards strata managers. So it's the volume of emotion that's heading towards being directed towards those managers. So I think, maybe 10 years ago, owners were not as aware, I think. So they weren't questioning things as much. They weren't, you know what I mean? They just went about their day. Now owners are very, very aware. They're questioning everything. You know what I mean? And that's increasing the load, the emotional load that's going to strata managers. And I
yeah.
think one of the problems is that the industry, so the company and the leaders, they're looking at systems and processes to solve that problem. And that won't solve a burnout problem.
A
And
people
I think they're looking for systems and processes and they're looking at going, well, the burnout that's happening in that team is a people problem. It's a people problem. If we replace the people, the problem will go away. And I think they're all starting to realize that that's not the case because they replace the people, new people come in, and the environment's the same, so they end up burnt out too. So it's becoming this circular motion. And I think they're starting to realize now that hang on, it's not a system and process problem, but it's also not a people problem. It's not something that if you replace the people, the problem goes away because it hasn't. So I think what's happening is, it's that misconception that burnout is a people problem. So, and I always try and look at it through a human lens. And it makes sense that that's the assumption that was made by leaders in the industry because no one no one wants to be the villain in the story, right? So we're always looking for an external cause. No one wants to be the reason that burnout is happening. No one wants to be the villain in that story. We always tell a story as if we're either the hero or the victim. No one tells a story as if we're the villain. Like that's just not how we tell stories. It's not how we look at things. So I think along the way, what's happened is there are some people in the industry, some leaders that have gone, hang on, the model doesn't work because it's continually creating burnout. We need to change that. But we do still have a lot of companies and leaders who are going, well, the burnout is a people problem. And they're just, it's interesting. So they're saying it's a people problem. If we replace the people, the problem will disappear. But then when they do realize that, hang on, it's an environment problem, when they go looking for the actual pain point and the problems that are causing the burnout, they then don't turn to a human approach.
Mm. So they're trying to adopt things like AI and systems and automations and things like that to
Yeah,
fix the problem.
yeah,
And I think, we spoke about this before. You also need to develop the humans who are operating the AI or that human capability to thrive.
yes.
What is the level of training and development and, people support and leadership development and so on like in the industry?
So I talk to a lot of strata managers. So yes, I talk to a lot of strata owners, but I also talk to a lot of strata managers. So I have a good relationship with a large amount of strata managers, and a lot of strata managers reach out to me kind of saying, hey, do you have any advice on how to manage this owner problem? Because I look at things like an owner. So I have a lot of conversations with strata managers. And I think what's actually happening is that the industry is really trying to provide training, right, to these strata managers, but they're training them in knowledge. So
Mm.
I think there is a misconception that if we keep giving them knowledge, they'll become better strata managers and therefore the problem will go away,
Yeah.
right? They'll be more capable. But I think the training that's missing from the industry is the human training, how to navigate complicated situations, how to understand human behavior, how to disrupt behavior patterns in an owner, how to redirect a conversation. All those skills aren't necessarily there, and that's the part that's causing the emotional load. Because, as I said, some strata managers are afraid to pick up the phone in case they can't handle the conversation on the other end.
I mean, ultimately, any of us now can go onto ChatGPT and
Mm-hmm.
get the information we want, right? And
Yeah.
that, I imagine that is increasing part of the load, because if I was an owner in a strata complex, I can get some pretty good legal advice, right? I might want to double check it, but I can put together a makeshift legal letter,
Yes.
or put together something that sounds very litigious or very official, or know my rights by
Yes.
asking ChatGPT or Claude or whatever your AI of choice is the right questions. How much of a load do you think the increase of knowledge of society, and you have touched on this a little bit, and the increase in systems that we think is going to fix the problem, how much of a load do you think that puts on people?
So it's interesting that you raised that. So I've actually heard that a lot over the last 6 months, that that's actually creating a large increase in that emotional load to strata managers. Because where an owner used to come to them and say, hey, I've got a question about such and such, they don't come to them and ask the question anymore. They come to them and present the proof that the strata manager is wrong.
Yeah.
They get this large, pre-written email from, AI, Chat GTP, Copilot, any of them, and they get this large, long email basically spelling out the version of the truth from the owner's perspective, right? And
Mm.
all the proof to back it up. And what that's meaning is that, again, the strata manager, if they're not given communication training, their response is to be defensive. And then you've got an accusation and a defensive response. That's not, you know what I mean? Both sides then are having an emotional response.
Yeah.
Both sides are then holding that emotional load. So, yes, AI is helping, and it will help in the long run once both sides get better at using it to be effective communicators.
Yeah.
Um, but at this point, yes, that is causing a large emotional load to strata managers, because they've then got to read that email. They've then got to go back and fact check, well, is the stuff that the owner is putting in that email actually correct? Because let's be honest, sometimes ChatGPT, gives us some information that sounds like a fact and it
Yeah.
turns out it's not. So just the labor that's required in that now, and the fact that it's no longer posing a question and asking for an answer, it's making an accusation, and then there's the reactive defensiveness from the strata manager. So in theory it's helping, but it's not.
No, and I can imagine, I mean, like you said, a few years ago, people would probably just ask a question, whereas now you have this ream of information that's come out of chat, and, this legal case and this thing and that thing. So the amount of time to read that, as opposed to answering a simple question, can I put a door there, or can I put a sign there, or can I put my bin there, is huge. But with the volume of, I see this in my business, like any of us can create so much output with AI, but do we really need all that output? Like, do we really need 10 social media posts a day that all kind of say the same thing? Do we really need 75 reports? Like, do we really need all of our clients getting reams of information? I'm starting to think that's going to stop being so impressive to people, and it's
Yeah.
just overloading people with more and more stuff that maybe doesn't align with what actually needs to get done, right? Like with the big picture thing.
Yeah. So I actually have a comment that I make all the time, and I use it all the time to explain what's happening with the owner experience in this country. And the comment I make is that owners are drowning in information and starved for understanding.
Yeah.
So AI is not necessarily helping that,
Yeah.
because it just gives more information and more information and more information. But what owners need is context back to their particular situation. They need to understand why something is happening. They need to understand why a decision was made. They need to understand what their options are going forward. They need to understand the outcome if they vote yes. They need to understand the outcome if they vote no. They need to understand with context. And I think things like Chat GTP can't give that sort of context because it doesn't have all the information about the building.
Yeah.
So it's like going up to a lawyer and asking them, what are my rights on this? And then not saying, okay, can you provide me the information and all the communication you've had, and can you give me all the, can you run a Strata, get us access to the Strata records on that and all that. Just going up and asking them, well, you're a lawyer, you should be able to give me the answer. And
Yeah.
that's kind of
Yeah.
what's happening,
Yeah.
but that's kind of also on the other side. AI is not helping the Strata industry either, because I'm seeing a wave of information being put out from the Strata industry. You know, every Strata professional now has, a LinkedIn post every single day about something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just putting information out there. But it's just this information overload.
It's just
It's
noise.
just creating an information overload. It's not actually helping because it's not contextual information that helps an owner understand. It's just, what is a bylaw? What is an owner's corporation? Like, I'm just like, that doesn't help me as an owner. I
Yeah.
need to know, what do I do when this happens in my
Yeah.
building because this happened before that.
Yeah. You're
And
not
no one
studying
can
and
give you that
agreeing all of the
information.
terms related to strata. Like,
And no
yeah.
one, the only person who can give you that context is your strata manager, is the person who has historical knowledge of your building, who is the person who can look back in the records and give you contextual guidance. But because the relationship between strata owner and strata manager is so strained in this country, most owners don't, that's not their approach. Their approach is to, I have to find the answer and prove to my strata manager that I have the right to do this. That that relationship that was supposed to be there just seems to be failing, and it's failing because the communication skills just are not being taught. Owner Owners are expecting a level of communication that strata managers just are not being trained in.
Yeah.
They're being given all this legislative training. They're being given, fire safety. They're being all these things because in some states in this country, a strata manager has to do CPD training for their license. But all of that is very knowledge, like, general knowledge information stuff. It's not communication skills. It's not the skills that are going to help them build great relationships with
Hmm.
people. So that entire
Knowing who
part is
you're talking
missing.
to, and yeah. I mean, obviously, I think everybody should have leadership and communication training, but how do you? So we kind of have this perfect storm, and I don't know if you see this so much in Strata, but I think it's a pretty industry wide thing of, we have young people coming in who really, I think, need to develop the skills to communicate and to critically think and to reason and so on before they start using AI to do things for them. But then they're just being bombarded instead with knowledge and, maybe not enough training, and certainly not those human skill sets to thrive. Plus, they're coming out of uni and they're already, or training, they're already concerned about burnout. How do we actually nurture people so that they stay in an industry and so they go up through the levels and, thrive in their roles?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest things, especially in Strata, is we are having this situation where people are not staying long term. Even people who are veterans for the industry are leaving the industry because it's just not manageable anymore. But I think even outside the strata industry, I think no matter what industry you're in, I think it's really important that when someone new comes in, you set them up for success. And I have this conversation even outside the strata industry. I've had this conversation, especially with organizations who are having large turnovers and they are having burnout rates and they are struggling to get high performance out of their teams. And you know, I have to have that really uncomfortable conversation with the director or the CEO and say, well, this is actually on you. Like, you haven't set these people up for success. You've brought somebody in at the bottom and just gone, okay, off you go. But that's not how it works. So it wasn't how it worked when I started my career. You know, when I started my career, you came in and you had a development plan built for you. And the person who was your leader, it was their responsibility, it was part of their role to develop you enough to move to the next level. And
And
I
people knew that you were a liability at the start. Like they knew you were trust, but they assumed that you would stay. Yeah.
Well, I started my career as a graphic designer, and everybody knew that when you came in as a junior designer, you knew nothing, right? So, you know, your qualification to be a graphic designer at that stage was to have an understanding of design principles. You know what I mean? Most of the time, you could qualify without even 100% understanding the technical tools and programs, you know, that you needed to do the job. So everyone knew that if you took in a completely green junior, they were going to know nothing. And for the first 12 months, you were going to have to put so much into them before they could actually give you any return on investment. But you knew that and you accepted that because you knew there was on the other side of that. So, you know, a junior designer usually stayed a junior designer for at least 2 to 3 years, right? You had to be a junior designer for 2 to 3 years before you could even be considered for a role as a midweight designer. And you knew as the either the team leader or the senior designer in the team, when you brought a junior in, you were going to have to spend a lot of time training them and giving them skills for the first 12 months before they were able to really contribute much to the team's performance. And yet they still got their salary, right? So the company knew that there was a loss going to happen there, right? A performance loss. But they did it because they knew after that 12 months, if that senior designer developed that junior designer correctly and had a great outcome, for the next 12 months you were going to get, for the next 12 months, 2 years, you were going to get someone ramping up to a midweight design skill, and they were going to be able to contribute to the performance of your team at that level and keep accelerating up, but you were only going to be paying them a junior rate. So the return on investment balanced over time. But I think what's happening now is we bring someone in as a junior designer, or now having moved into marketing, a marketing assistant, and it's just expected they should start performing. But it doesn't make sense. You can't bring someone in as a junior and expect them to be able to do the role. You bring someone in as a junior with an expectation to train them to do the role. But I'm not sure that's actually what's happening in all companies anymore. I definitely know there are some that are doing an amazing job. There's companies out there that have amazing graduate programs, that have junior, you know, programs where they take them through, and they almost like a residency in a hospital. They take them around, they teach them all aspects of the business, and there's some companies that are doing a great job. But I do feel like there is a growing trend for companies to now just go, well, I'm paying that junior, I expect them to to perform at at a capacity that is going to contribute to performance of the team. And I don't think that's actually realistic.
Yeah, I find this fascinating coming from, we spoke about this a little bit before, coming from a small business background where I have so much control over the PD and the things like that we give our teams. And I think sometimes you imagine when you're in small business that corporate runs like this slick machine, but you know, everything's decision making by committee and cost cutting and how do we, you know, improve the bottom line and what do we do for our shareholders. And yeah, there's so much, definitely not the grass is greener on the other side.
Not at all. And I think I think that's a situation. As I said, it's not in every company, and I wouldn't like to come on here and say that like all corporates have got this
Yeah,
wrong.
yeah.
But there are definitely some corporates who are not putting the value on developing people when they bring them into a role. There is this expectation that if we hire you to do a role, we should be able to put you in the role and you should be able to kickstart and off you go. And I think that is happening in the strata industry a bit with strata assistants or junior strata managers, however the companies has named them and structured it. But someone new to the industry comes in and is supposed to be supporting owners. And you're like, well,
It
what are
just
you
doesn't
doing to
work.
make sure that that person is being developed so that they can be an asset for the company, an asset to the owners corporation?
Mm,
And I'm not sure that's always what's happening. And we've got strata managers that are, as I said, not getting the skill base they need, but also ending up in a position where they're at a level that people expect that they just magically know this stuff and they were never trained in it. Like, and I think that's what's happening. There are some senior strata managers where people, the companies go, well, we're paying them to be a senior. We've hired them as a senior. They should know how to manage people.
yeah,
Yeah, but
the title does not.
if
Yeah,
nobody taught them how to have a difficult conversation, if no one taught them how to disrupt a communication pattern on the phone to stop things from escalating, how would they know that? That's not normal training. That has to be something that the strata sector looks at and goes, this is actually really valuable training, and this is going to make our strata managers better.
yeah.
It's going to make the relationship with our owners better, and it's going to help us retain our customers. And we're going to actually invest in doing that because we believe in the value of that. But that's not happening across the board.
It's not a soft skill. It's like the quality of your life is dictated by the quality of your conversations. So, yeah,
Exactly.
the
Yeah,
easier, yeah, hard conversation now, easy life later. But
definitely,
we're just not
definitely.
teaching people that.
No.
So you've probably covered it, but if you were to suggest one change to help to decrease the rates of burnout in the strata industry, what would it be?
Companies need to start investing in relationship training for their strata managers. So anyone on their frontline, anyone that communicates directly with owners, companies need to start investing in specific training to help them be better at that relationship building. Everything from communication, everything from changing terminology in the way they speak, changing from I to we to inclusive to, and as I said, owners have emotional reactions. We have human reactions, right? We're talking about our home. So our reaction to things when we feel like something is unfair or we've lost control or it's going to cost us more money, especially, we have human responses. And I always say, I'm probably not the best owner either. Like I've been unhappy with my strata manager at times. I'm not at all saying that I'm a perfect owner because I'm
Mm,
anything but that's why I know how important it is for strata managers to have the training to know how to navigate that conversation with me when I'm in an emotional state, because their ability to disrupt that conversation pattern and de-escalate is going to ultimately reduce their emotional load, but also make that relationship better and that communication outcome better for me, even though I'm the one that's probably being a little unreasonable on
yeah,
the phone
yeah,
call at that point.
yeah. I'm listening to you thinking, I'm sure I've probably been unreasonable once or twice.
Yeah.
But also, I think knowing the communication style of the person you're communicating with, like, I don't want reams of information. I just want them to get to the point. Yes,
Yes.
we can do this. No, we can't do that. Somebody else might will want the chit chat. They'll
Actually.
want the weather. They'll want the like, how's the kids?
Yeah.
And it's just knowing the person
Yeah.
in front of you.
And knowing how to analyze that within a conversation, because at the end of the day, I think owners need to also understand that strata managers, you know, they might have thousands of owners, in their portfolio. They can't know all of you individually and personally and know your communication,
Mm,
preferences. It's unrealistic.
yeah,
Um, but what they can know is how very quickly to understand what's happening on the other side, to very quickly be able to assess and diagnose where the person on the other side of that conversation is at and what communication tools and strategies to implement to change the direction of that. Because
definitely.
when I call my strata manager, I might be upset and I might be angry and I might be feeling over. I don't want to feel any of those things, you know. And if the strata manager is able to de-escalate that
Yeah.
really quickly, that benefits me. I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to be in that state,
Mm-hmm.
but I am
They
having an
can
emotional
still,
reaction to something that's happened.
make you feel heard, and yeah. So I close Jody the podcast episode every time with one question, which you already know, which is, if there was no barriers, what is the legacy that you'd like to leave?
So I'm going to give you the human answer because I'm a big believer in not giving the LinkedIn professional
Corporate.
answer to things
Yeah.
like this. And it's a funny one. It made me laugh when I realized that this is a question you ask at the end of your podcasts. Because if you had asked me 5 years ago, I probably would have given you the really pompous corporate answer of, I want to lead a company to success and, all those things. And that was 100% what I probably would have told you. But 5 years later, having taken a career gap, having paused my career for a while and focused on my pillars of pause and undertaken a year of giving back to really know what is actually important to me, I think what I would probably say is the legacy I want to leave has nothing to do with my career. The legacy I want to leave is I want to I want to know that I've shown the next generation of my family how to be happy, because that's something that I think we're not very good at as a society. And I now understand that what I do with my life models what the next generation of my family will value. And I think if my legacy is that I showed them how important it is to find your happiness, then I think that's an amazing legacy to leave.
I agree. It's that I can't remember the exact saying, but it's that, to change the world, start at home.
Hmm.
And that you don't need to have a title to be a
That's
leader.
it.
It just starts by positively influencing one person and then the
Yeah,
next person.
that's it.
Thank you so much for joining me,
No
Jody. I will
problems.
put a link to Strata Stories in the show notes, and we'll speak to you soon.